Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
So it is incredible to think that this is our 100th laid-back, data-backed discussion about USMSOs, Canadian LPs, products and market analysis through the lens of data. 100 episodes already. Can you believe it, Emily?
Yeah, I can't believe you've all come by the High Rise 100 times.
100 times. It's crazy to think about the beginnings of this thing as a little Clubhouse experiment for those that may remember Clubhouse or might have been in the Clubhouse. We had the High Rise Clubhouse. It was the throes of the pandemic. Clubhouse was the cool new thing. I think that they had opened up their invites to everyone on iOS. I don't even think you could jump in as an Android user quite yet. And we thought, hey, let's do a Clubhouse and see how it goes.
Yeah, I feel like Clubhouse was the way we were tiptoeing back into interacting with everyone as an industry and just hearing, thought leader opinions because of the absence of any conferences, any in-person interactions. And it's funny because when I remember us starting the Clubhouse, it was still, I think it was like the spring. So it was still like dark pretty early. And I remember kind of it felt pretty lonely just listening to people's voices talking in the industry who I used to see so regularly. So it was interesting. The Clubhouse was like a mandala, right? Like we would make it and then it would blow away. You didn't have anything to take from it. So we thought if we're going to put effort into this, I think it was you who thought of it. Let's do a podcast. And so the High Rise podcast was born.
Yeah. It's like, you know what's cool? Like Clubhouse. What's even cooler? A podcast, which is it's crazy to think. But it was very much that. The Clubhouse was great, and obviously, I mean, it's still around. I don't ever hop on there. I'm not sure how it's doing, but a lot of that has been gone over to like Twitter Spaces and others that are really successful. And I know like Poseidon runs a space weekly, which is awesome. And the benefit there is that you can actually record it because you're right. Clubhouse was a lot of work on a pre-show, lining up people to come, be available, and then you'd record in the moment and it would be gone. And I think that was a part of their value proposition was it's there for a minute. It's like how Snapchat's whole thing is like, oh, the messages disappear, or at least it used to be that. I've not used Snapchat ever, so I'm kind of not speaking from experience, but that's like the differentiator. But the problem for us was it was hard to see it all go away because it's such great content. So we thought we'd bring it to the podcast, and we're 100 episodes in, and it's really gotten me thinking about kind of how do we get to this point, right? It's like many things. You start doing something, and next thing you know, it's a thing, and that's very much what the High Rise has become, much like our careers in this space. So I thought a good use of time today would be to talk about our careers in this space, how we got started, what's been surprising to us, on our journey here and what we're looking forward to, So I guess I can dive in, with how I got started. And I've told this story, a number of times in different ways. When I think about my lifespan in this industry, it's a decade at this point. And it was a decade ago was a very different world. There was no adult use, cannabis at this point. It hadn't been legalized in Colorado or Washington State yet. There was medical. And these were the days where we would be talking to people that were in the industry. And there are, people that have been around longer than a decade, but dealing with things like federal rates, right? Like dispensaries getting raided all the time, which is insane to think about, now that we have like publicly listed companies, publicly traded companies out there and entire countries like Canada that are legal. So, just to kind of like set the stage there, this was the world that existed. We started Leafly, myself, Scott Vickers, and Brian Wanselich, my co-founders with Headset, kind of as an idea, thinking, hey, there's an opportunity to kind of demystify cannabis for a mainstream consumer, like an average person, right? Someone that's not like the stoner archetype, that most, media was kind of catering to. And that was fine, but we knew there were a lot of consumers out there that it was a thing that, was part of who they were, but it didn't define, who they were. And so we wanted to create a platform that did that. And, Leafly was the byproduct of that. And I think we did some things that were pretty interesting. And again, 10 years ago was a big deal. Today, it's like, yeah, of course, everything's like a mainstream brand, designed for a mainstream audience, but it really was pretty novel at the time. there were some, things that, the indica sativa hybrid kind of classification system. Like we didn't come up with that. That was what was being used in many dispensaries at the time as a way to kind of, segment out the different flower strains that were at a dispensary. And that's all it was flower strains. There were no packaged goods. The edible market wasn't really much of a market. You'd get these like kind of homemade products in the Ziploc bag. It was crazy, not tested in these dispensary environments at the time. But, for better or for worse, I think we really perpetuated that. And it's an easy classification, I think, for people to understand and why it's used still so much. But, obviously we know that there's a lot more that goes into the different effects than this, sativa indica hybrid. And really, what is a sativa? What is an indica? The age old question. And, people that are much smarter than me that study this stuff, know better than I do. But, we did that. And there's some things that are a byproduct of that, I think, that are pretty interesting to see that once you know it, you kind of see it everywhere, like the colors that we came up with. And I know Brian, when he designed the color palette, he really looked at the flower. And, you've got green, you've got some of that like orange, the kind of reddish orange, and you've got some purple. And that became the classification for, indica sativa hybrid. And now you see it everywhere, right? You'll see indica as like a purple, like they'll just put a purple sticker on it, or it'll have some, color coding like that. And that's pretty cool, to see that that's kind of become the standard out there. Another funny story is our domain name. So when we were coming up with the name Leafly, we were like, we just had a list of names, of plant related, cannabis related things. I don't know, green database or whatever. We were just trying to put words together. It's really, yeah, pretty bad. I think Scott at one point wanted to call it cannabis as like a database of strains and just stuff that there probably is a cannabis, and forgive me if they're out there. But we thought, the .ly top level domain was kind of in vogue. It was like a hip thing. There was like the URL shortener. Everyone's probably run across links that are like bit.ly. And it was a nice, like, a short domain, but it was, I don't know, just kind of out there. A lot of people didn't understand how that worked because everything is like .com, right? And so we'd get a lot of feedback of like leaf.ly.com. We're like, no, it's just leaf.ly is Leafly, right? Is how we said it, but it was leaf.ly, and we didn't have leafly.com. And actually there was someone that had leafly.com that owned the domain, but there was nothing there. And the craziest thing was back in 2010 when we got the domain. So the way top level domains is kind of nerdy, but the way the top level domains work are they're actually country codes. Like everyone's seen like .co, .uk. So like the .uk is a country code. So .ly is actually a country code for the country of Libya. And Libya at the time was still run by Gaddafi, right? And it was still a very, very obviously strict world. And they started cracking down on websites that used the .ly for things that they considered like unsavory. And there were sites that were getting shut down because they had a .ly domain. And it's crazy. If you lose your domain name, like and you're an internet company, you're gone. Like you just might as well not exist. And Google forgets who you are and you've got to start over. So it's like a deadly thing. So we were really, really freaked out about this. And the .leafly.com domain actually came up, and we were able to grab it, and we didn't have to pay anything for it. We just bought it like we would buy anything, which is crazy to think. And the rest is really history. Getting into the space, I know there's a lot of stories about, the passion for the plant, and it really wasn't so much the case for us. I mean, it was, again, something that, we like beer, we like wine, from like an adult use recreational perspective. But, I would say like, kind of getting in, we've learned a lot more since then. And as we get into kind of what's most surprising, I'll touch on that. But we really did get into it because we saw it as like this emerging category, this new exciting thing that was happening all around us. And we were in California at the time. And it's this proliferation of dispensaries and people talking about cannabis. And we thought, this is crazy. Let's do it. And we had great numbers. We really made a huge splash when we came into the market because we were so differentiated. But no, there were no investors. There was no Emily Paxia out there quite yet. And, when we talked to angel investors about it and shared our numbers, everyone loved it. But everyone was like, this is, the highest risk of high risk startups in the sense of like, is there really going to be an industry here? And, we believed it at the time. But then in California, we tried to pass, I think it was Prop 19, where there was an adult use legalization in 2010, and it failed. And we were like, oh my God, maybe we were wrong. California voted this down, and for a variety of reasons, for good reasons, I think it didn't make it. But it was kind of like a dark, okay, maybe there's nothing here. Then in 2012, obviously, we saw the wave that came with Colorado and Washington, and we were kind of, our original thought of this, there is an industry here, kind of came about. So yeah, that's kind of the start. And there's a million stories in between there. But I want to hear your story, Emily. I want to hear, you woke up one day and you're like, I'm going to jump into this crazy industry. What exactly happened?
I woke up and chose violence for my life. And I loved hearing that story, because I have to be honest. I mean, so we invested in Headset in 2015, and one of the origin stories around that was that I was at this, what was 2015, right?
Yeah, it was 2015.
In 2014, I was at this conference, and I was on a panel as an investor, and someone asked me, what is the thing that you're looking most for to invest in this industry? And a lot of the other investors were like packaging, and I don't even remember, like grow tech. And I was like, consumer data. I was like this, and I came from a history of doing research and consulting, and always trying to find the white space for my clients, like American Express or Viacom, to explore and expand their market share. And data is at the forefront of all of that. There's two sides to data too, which I think is really important. There's the quantitative data, and then there's also the kind of qualitative data of observation and exploration. And I love both of those things, because I feel like there's a lot of information, but I like to find where the intuition guides you in there. And so I would say that is how the origin of Poseidon began, is around intuition. I think the widely known story is that we did get into this a little bit from a compassionate lens of a seed that was planted a long time ago, and our dad was super sick, and the hospice nurse mentioned, kind of an off the cuff comment in Western New York, just smoke some pot, John, because he was super, super sick. And I think what that did was it just disassembled the programming of the war on drugs for me, and created a bit of a window to take it more seriously than other people. And I think you never know why certain things happen in your life, but then when you do recognize it, it's a lot about being very aware and tuned into your surroundings. And so, I'm a person of natural curiosity, and went to NYU for a master's in psychology. And then, I wasn't that happy in New York, moved to California, and saw Apothecarium and Vapor Lounge and Kiva, and companies that were starting to take shape. Kurova, Curiously Strong. And I just couldn't believe that this existed in this manner. And so, being a curious person, I started diving in on it. And Leafly actually was one of the companies that, like, I still remember when I had the phone call with you guys, and I was like, oh my God, the founders of Leafly is like really cool, because you guys are really founders of this industry. A lot of people couldn't even conceive of cannabis technology until you guys built it. And so I think that it takes a lot of visionary people to bring something into the realm of possibility. And so Poseidon was born. I remember I called Morgan. I was walking down Ashbury, because I live right around the corner from the Grateful Dead house. And I was walking down Ashbury, and I said to Morgan, I said, I think there's something happening here. And I think it might be that, and I don't think I called it cannabis at the time, because I did not know enough at that point.
Sure, yeah.
I think weed is going to be the opportunity of our generation. And my brother being really, we're entrepreneurs by family. Our father owned his own business. And I think it's like a little bit bred into us to be daring and crazy enough to try it. So, and I give him a ton of credit, because he moved all the way to California from Rhode Island, and we did this all together. And so, and now we have an amazing team of human beings who all have really interesting ways that they found their path into cannabis. But, Poseidon exists. You made me think of this when you were talking about Leafly, or I was laughing when you said that, because I remember people calling it leaf fly.
Leaf fly. Oh yeah. A lot of people, when we would call customers and try and sell them services, and they're like, oh, we're calling from Leafly. They're like, oh, we love Leafly. And then we would switch and just say, oh, I'm so happy you love Leafly. Like, we didn't want to correct them, because we were trying to sell them. But yeah, it was, I think it still is the case. I think a lot of people call it Leafly.
Yeah. Well, the reason and just as one other thing about our origin story is that, Poseidon, Paxia is our last name. Pax is Greek for peace. And we have a history of our family going from Greece to Sicily, but we're also big sailors. We grew up sailing together, and it's not what people think. You've actually been sailing with us. Like, some people think we're sitting out there in our yachting whites and just like cruising around. But no, sailing is a pretty challenging sport. And there's a lot of navigating, adjusting, and kind of testing your hypothesis when you're out in the natural elements. And so we came up with the name Poseidon because we just thought that navigating this whole thing would be very much like navigating the natural elements of the sea and the air and all of them together. And so we have a lot of respect for that. And so we have a lot of respect for Poseidon. And similarly, I didn't want it to be anything that was green because, frankly, I think I've always had a view, and I know I've talked about this on the podcast, that cannabis wouldn't always live in a silo. And so while Poseidon was a firm born and is fully entirely dedicated to cannabis, I wanted something that would evolve, that would be open to evolving as cannabis evolved past this siloed space that it lives in today. So that's why we have the name Poseidon. And I'm glad for it because it's kind of our own thing and it's a little bit different.
I love it. I think it makes sense on so many levels. And I think it's an apt analogy of the industry is the sea, right? So many times I feel like we're at the mercy of things that are outside of our control. And it's how you navigate those things, how you survive through those things. I think it's perfect parallel to this space because it's a constant effort, right? With everything always going on and all the challenges that come with it. So I don't think you could have come up with a better name. And I'm thankful that you guys came in and really paved the way, for venture to come into this space, because that story was like genuine. Like Leafly, there was nobody, traditional venture were not interested in it. Even with good like consumer internet numbers, like good metrics, it just wasn't. There weren't people out there, and so you guys popped up on our radar back in 2015 as we transitioned out of Leafly after selling the company and ready for the next challenge and data. You were like one of the few that were even out there at the time. So I know a lot more have followed in your footsteps, but that's what it takes sometimes, and it's never easy being the first and or super early. And they say timing is everything. And with Leafly, I think we were very early, but I think we helped push things forward. At least I like to hope we did. And same thing with Headset. Like, it was a big road in 2015 to get people excited about data in the industry. And like you said, you got it because you had experience in it. And a lot of operators in 2015 didn't have a lot of experience in data. And that's changed a lot, right? You get a lot of people coming from traditional categories that come in that understand the need for it. But, it does take some time.
I could not believe walking around Hall of Flowers, how many brands that we met up with that were like, oh, we love Headset. We're always looking at the data. And that, from like an investment standpoint, just to share that was one of the things we wanted to calibrate for. We knew that we would have to pull people along a little bit because I think people were also nervous to share their data. Let's face it, this is an industry that had been born out of an illicit market. And so sharing data in order to gain access to data wasn't something we thought would be easy. So I think we all went into that eyes wide open, but I was so excited to hear companies talking about it when we were at the show last week, because I think that was a huge shift in what I've witnessed in our market.
Yeah, it's great that everyone has come around. I think a lot of it is just it's how competitive it's gotten to, and we like to hope that the data can help them be more successful. And it's kind of our mission. If we can help the operators be more successful, then this industry will be more successful. And after 10 years in it, I'm like very much bought into the success of this industry. So I think we're playing our part. With all the pain and suffering that comes with the space in an early category like this, it's going to be pretty cool to kind of look back when everything is pretty well normalized and see kind of what we helped create, both of us. So from there, I want to talk about like the most surprising things for us. For me, it was getting into and getting involved. I think honestly, the most surprising was learning so much about it because I didn't have a lot of firsthand experience with like the challenges and like what a Schedule 1 or what scheduling even means, like learning that, and then learning about the imbalance of incarceration, for minorities, people of color, that were impacted by the war on drugs. And I think I just had never thought deeply about it. And it's, in a way, it's like, oh, it's tough to say. You'd like to think that you're thinking about all that stuff, but really, it wasn't something a lot of people talked about, I think in the earliest days of this stuff. I think since then, there's all sorts of literature, there's all sorts of media around it, and you can learn a lot more about it. But at the time, it was kind of all new, and you'd hear these anecdotes and you hear these stories, and really eye-opening. And then there's something to be said about, helping get rid of the stigma in this space, because it's slowly getting there, right? With getting people out of prison, as we, saw this week with President Biden, making a call to the governors and with the federal incarceration and so on. So getting there, that was a big surprise for me. When I think about like other surprises, like even today, I would say, as fast as it moves, I'm surprised we haven't seen more from the executive or legislative side and at the federal level. I'm surprised that we're still talking about it, and like still talking about stuff like safe banking. It's crazy. I would have bet long ago that this stuff would have been dealt with, but it's surprising that we're still here and still talking about it. But there's been progress, and I feel like we're right on the precipice of it. And the last big surprising thing, I think, is like how strong the stigma is still, like how powerful that stigma is, what the impact that the war on drugs had for a lot of people and their perceptions about cannabis, even with all the data that's coming out about legalization and all the benefits that come with legalization, all the benefits, ending prohibition and the war on drugs have for people. There's still a stigma, right? And I think, it's still treated in many ways like a radioactive substance. Like when we were at Benzinga in Chicago, and we did some tours in Illinois, and they have to go into the back and you can't have any product out on the floor. I feel like that in a way perpetuates the stigma. In Washington, when they first legalized, you weren't able to look inside the stores. There was no windows into the businesses. And I think that perpetuates the stigma, because it makes it feel like something that's, prohibited, something that, shouldn't be out there. And that's not what we're trying to do here. And I'm surprised that it's still very much that in many places. And it's not like that everywhere, but I still think that the stigma is still strong. And maybe, it's going to take a lot longer than I thought to unwind some of that impact that the war on drugs has had.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you on those surprises. I think from an investor standpoint, I have a little bit of a different view. I think one of the things that has surprised me, and I would say to the downside, it's been an amazing emerging market cycle that we've experienced that has been also impacted by externalities such as the federal government's lack of action, some of the states slowing their rollout, and the lack of enforcement on the illicit markets. All of these things have come, and like things like the rescinding of the Cole memo and the FinCEN guidance getting really murky, all of these things. And so with these compressed cycles, we've seen these like crazy run-ups. And to the downside of that is I've seen capital flow in mass to bad shepherds of capital. And I'm just going to say it, they're terrible. They've destroyed billions of dollars in this market.
Still,
and so,
too, right?
Yeah. And so my hope on the next go round, because we saw a little window of that last Thursday, is that the capital flows to those who are demonstrating wisdom and prudence around their use of the capital and building actual businesses. To the other side of that, I've been super surprised by the resiliency of the founders of this industry. And I get to work closely with many of them, from the large companies all the way through to the startups with our newer investment strategy. And I truly love entrepreneurs. And I think that our job as investors is to be like, I always think of entrepreneurs as the art and we're the frame. Like the best we can do to be the scaffolding around those people so that they can excel in building businesses. That's how we all win, is if we all build businesses, then we all build an industry. And so I'm hopeful that the charlatans or the carpetbaggers of this industry grabbed their grab and are gone, and that the next wave of capital that comes in just takes a little bit more time and evaluates the track record of the people in the industry. And so those are some of the things that have been massive surprises to me. The other side to this is I think we're actually getting to a tipping point where we're going to be able to really create more access for entrepreneurship in this industry. And it comes a little bit from what we talked about last week with Suzanne and Jarrell with the Climb Act and some of the steps being taken, and also people being pardoned. I hope that Biden reviews other groups that he could pardon, such as nonviolent offenders of also selling cannabis, because let's face it, that's what this industry is built on. So we should look at some of those things. I know Tom Angell has been talking about it, but I'm really hopeful that instead of the world has revolved around wealth generation from being held by gatekeepers. And I was thinking about this on my run yesterday. I was thinking about what if instead of gatekeepers, we could be gate openers? And in this industry, we've already seen wealth creation. Like I think about people who were early in GTI who are no longer there, but have moved on and they're doing new things because a lot of people aren't in this as lifers. They're in it for a period of time and move on. But I think about those folks who like created wealth in their life that wasn't possible if they hadn't leaned into an early emerging industry, really paid their dues, and then saw the growth and maybe they just moved on to other projects. But I do think that has happened in this industry. It's created opportunity for people to pave a way to build businesses. Like Morgan and I have built a business, Patrick's built businesses, you've built businesses. Like people have built businesses in the industry that maybe didn't have that opportunity in a more traditional sector because we were brave enough and bold enough to do it. But I hope that we'll continue to, like I said, as an allocator in this industry, I'm confined by my strategies, which have very specific target return profiles and stages of company, all these different things. But I hope that as we continue to grow as an industry, we can, be gate openers rather than just gatekeepers so that we can build a whole new generation of wealth around this space together.
Wow, that's really well said. I think that with round 2 coming up with the US right on the precipice here of some significant change, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some of those coming back a second time. But I think that the good news is that there's just more data out there. There's more learnings. I think in that big initial wave, a lot of that was led by Canadian legalization and this kind of, okay, is this the start of something massive? And a big transfer of wealth happened in a big way, and capital is still kind of getting burned in a lot of places. But I think that now we see that, right? We have those data points, right? And we can point to that, and hopefully everyone can make smarter investments this time around. So, it was a good like trial run, with Canada. And now we got the real show is on or will be on soon here. So hopefully that scenario, where the capital goes to the right places does play out. So what are you most excited for? Like, it's what's been surprising, but what are you looking forward to? What keeps you going day to day?
Well, it is the entrepreneurship of the industry. I love the constant innovation that I'm seeing. I love that people are brave enough to build brands and products and services that are helping to lead the market in a positive direction, because I feel like this has all been a part of destigmatizing it to the extent that we have been able to succeed at that. And so I do feel like, I think about the fact that when I first got into the industry, I didn't feel like there were many products that represented my stylistic choices or my lifestyle. And I love seeing that has changed, that I now have like an Edie Parker, like really pretty little orange bowl sitting on my table right next to my other pretty things that I really like to have, or my books that I really like to display. And I like to think about the fact that for several years now, I've gone to the Outside Lands Music Festival and I've been able to go and purchase cannabis on site and to experience that, or to know that musicians are also getting care packages from our friends at some of the companies that have branded products. Like, I love that I'm starting to see this creativity and integration of other lifestyle components, or even the athletes, like in the work with Athletes for Care, and seeing how athletes are integrating cannabis into a program around wellness as a broader shift in society, this shift in how we think about wellness proactively and living better lives, not just longer lives. And I think that cannabis is right there at that whole intersection of all of those things that are happening. And so I get really excited about that. And I have the ability, being an investor in the industry, especially on the private side, to work so closely with companies that I can see how that's actually translating. So I don't have to sit and read headlines that have been largely negative for a while about our market. I get to see real things happening, and that's what keeps me going. And that's one of the things I'm hoping we can convey through this podcast for people who are wanting to participate or who are participating and feeling a lot of these headwinds, but just knowing that there's a whole community of people here building real businesses that are really exciting and leading the way.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you?
Yeah, definitely those things. Seeing, I don't know how much it's matured since 2010. Talking about the edible brands or lack of brands. I remember when we first saw like a packaged like chocolate bar with cannabis in it that was at multiple dispensaries was like eye-opening. It was kind of one of those things where, you had a sense of like, oh, one day there will be this. And then you started seeing it and it was kind of crazy. And now, this is obviously everywhere. So I think for me, it's the continued normalization that I'm excited for. Just kind of seeing that mission, like the mainstream audience coming into the category. We talk about the numbers a lot. We talk about sales. And I think that obviously access and making sure that there are more stores, in areas for people to go to. We covered that Leafly report with the retail deserts. I think that's a huge way to grow this industry. But I think beyond that, it's getting more people into the category, getting more people to go into a store and, explore it. And I think that I'm excited for, the stigma to continue to erode away so that we can see broader acceptance, so we can see a more casual consumer come through and treat it like anything. Like one of the things we've talked about on the podcast is the Minnesota stuff. And I think it's wild, like that it's at restaurants now and, it's made by breweries and, local craft breweries that are making cannabis drinks. And, people are ordering this at restaurants, like in a meaningful way. And it's normalized. Like I'm really excited for the consumption lounges and the wave of consumption lounges that are coming. And there are a lot of smart people that are working on this in the industry to create these great experiences. But I think that those consumption lounges will still cater to the core consumer in the sense of like, most people going there are going to be cannabis consumers already. Where, I mean, maybe not at a restaurant, maybe someone's not going to try it, but they might order it on a whim, right? And be like, I'll try this drink, that's maybe less than 5 milligrams. And, you can be sitting at a table having that. Someone could be sitting at a table having a glass of wine and it's, everyone's at the same party. And so I think that's what gets me excited, and I know it's not going to happen tomorrow. But we've done it. I've been here 10 years. You've been here almost just about 10 years. It's like just about time, to see this stuff happen. And maybe it'll happen in the next 10. But, you mentioned a great point that for those that are out there doing this or want to be in this or are in this and feeling those headwinds, and there's a lot of people that are out there that are building this industry. It very much is that. Like we're all part of it, right? We can point to things and challenges and everything, but we're all in it. It's like that saying, like, everyone hates traffic, but you're traffic. Like you're creating the traffic.
I do hate traffic.
Right. But in a big way, like you contribute to it, right? It's like we're all contributing to this for better, for worse, as best we can. And so, to that end, we had an opportunity at the Hall of Flowers in Santa Rosa to sit down with a few people that we know that have been in the space for some time, and just a handful of characters that we've crossed paths with in a variety of ways. That have, similar, time and have great origin stories, and are really building this space up with us and with everyone, listening right now. So we wanted to capture some of those stories while we're at Hall of Flowers, and it's pretty fun. And I think you'll really enjoy the conversations. And if we had our way, we would interview everybody there, but just don't have the time. But we'll continue to do this. So enjoy hearing, the origin stories of, some others that have been in the space for a long time.
Hi everybody, we're here at Hall of Flowers in Santa Rosa today. It's a gorgeous day, and we're going to be interviewing some people for our 100th episode of The High Rise, and I'm really excited because the first person I found is our dear friend and colleague Eric Pearson, who is the CEO and founder of Spark. And Spark is one of the longest running cannabis businesses in California, really. So I'm so happy you're here with us today. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah. So the questions we're asking today, we're just trying to, because Sai and I are going to be reflecting on our time in the industry, and I thought it would be great if you'd share a little bit about how you got into the industry.
Well, I went to high school and college and was born in Indiana, so I had to go back pretty much as far east or west as I could after that. And as someone who sold cannabis through high school and college, and even grew cannabis in college in Indiana, I came out to get involved in the industry a little bit. I also wanted to get involved I wanted to build homes and do construction too. And I came out here and, I met up with an organization called Sonoma Alliance for Medical Marijuana way back in the day, married Pat Jacobs and all the old school folks there, and got politically involved in the cannabis component, and that took me to San Francisco, and it just kind of ran from there. So, politics, my background in construction, and a love for cannabis put those all together, and that seemed to be, the path I needed to take.
That's awesome. And so, you opened a store that kind of defined the new era of cannabis retail from my perception. What year was that again?
That was like 2009. We opened in 2010.
Yep. And you were written up in many articles, I remember. And when I got into the industry, it was a real inspiration for me.
Yeah, thanks. We had an AIA award, American Institute of Architects, honorable mention or something like that. New York Times wrote about it. It was pretty cool. Yeah, we just really took a high-end approach. It's not feasible to build dispensaries like that, today, because of, you have to actually think about metrics and finances and making sure they're profitable. We spend quite a bit of money, and we had more back then, and so we hit a home run. It was quite well received, and we saw a lot of businesses come after that to really take that that Apple Store look, I guess is what it was.
Yeah, definitely. And so as you've pursued a career in cannabis, what would be a couple of things that, you've even, for anyone who is not familiar with Spark's story, they really, you should go check out their website, but they've been through one of the biggest fires in Sonoma in 2017. You went from a medical market that was really about caregivers to this massive shift through Proposition 64. We were together the night for that election.
We found out Donald Trump was president.
Things were crazy. Yeah. And then, so now we have a legal adult use market, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, has been extraordinarily painful for many, many, many people here. But I'm curious about, for you and your career in cannabis, what have been a few of the surprises of managing a business in this industry?
Well, gosh, where do I start? It's something every day. What the surprises that I'm so glad we don't have to deal with anymore were the federal government. It's like, who's surveilling us, or who's raiding us up in Mendocino, or what's the DOJ going to do, or do we get a landlord letter? Like, it's really nice to have those days behind us. The surprises now, I think, are really just financial in nature. It's looking at, digging into the finances, looking at how difficult the market is in general. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any surprises out of DC, which we were optimistic with the Democratic administration. We'd see some positive news there. And so, yeah, we've seen a lot of surprises. The less surprises, the better right now. And, I feel like a lot of folks who are out here today, like, everybody's in a bit of a holding pattern, right? We're buckling down, we're cutting costs, we're renegotiating leases, whatever it takes to keep things to moving in a positive direction, and kind of waiting for better days and things to shake out a little bit.
I think that's exactly right. You've always leaned in on the politics side of things, and have been one of the reasons that we always liked working with you is you've ingrained yourself in the community around it. And you did it in San Francisco, and I watched your process in Sonoma, which you can tell where it makes a difference, because Sonoma County has an active and vibrant cannabis community, and Napa County actually does not.
They do. Sonoma County's got its pluses and minuses. A lot of the cities have regulated. The county's done a really poor job with cultivation, and that's something that I continue to work on with our board of supervisors. We have a new environmental impact report. Environmental laws in California are really strict, so essentially, in order for the government of Sonoma County to permit cultivation in a not so expensive way, then we need to go through this environmental process and redraft the law. So we've been pushing really hard in Sonoma County for the government to go through this process, and we're 2 years into a 4-year process to get a new set of laws in Sonoma County that would make permitting cannabis like ministerial and over the counter, would allow tourism and hospitality and retail components onto these farms, much like wineries have. And we have the political support to do it if we can just keep pushing and getting the bureaucrats and our folks that run our government and do the day-to-day to get on board. We'll get there in the next couple of years, and we should have a pretty incredible system here in Sonoma County.
That's great. So what are you most excited about for what's coming next in cannabis and for Spark?
It's getting through this phase. I think, this is a really tough time for everybody. So just getting through this. That's what I'm most excited about. But looking forward, it's the fun things are political in nature for me, and it's creating new opportunities that otherwise are different and new and unheard of. And so back to that tourism and cannabis, getting to the point to where we have a cannabis farm where consumers can come and experience the plant, buy, touch, grow, smoke, and learn the plant and have that firsthand experience on a farm. That's what's really exciting. That's number one. Opening new stores is number two. We're a company that is retail first, and so continuing to open new stores and look at new opportunities. We've got some in Southern California we're looking at, and some here in the Bay Area. And yeah, I think that's the gist of it.
I think that's awesome. We're so happy to be here at Hall of Flowers, Santa Rosa. It's a beautiful day, and we ran into our good friend Hannah Buchan. She's the COO of E100 Parker. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience today?
Yeah. Sure, great. As Emily just mentioned, I'm Hannah Buchan. I'm the COO of E100 Parker and Flower by E100 Parker. I actually really got started growing up. I've always been a cannabis lover and a consumer, and I actually grew up in the fashion industry. My mom started a clothing store when she was just 21 years old. We've had it in our family for 40 years, so I've actually been going to trade shows my whole life, unlike nothing dissimilar to Hall of Flowers. And then fast forward, really started my professional career in finance and capital markets, and then have been investing in the space for the last 5 years, really as the intersection between consumer packaged goods and cannabis and finance, which I find to be like my core three interests. I've recently taken on the role as COO at E100 Parker, and I find that to be really interesting to me because I grew up in the fashion industry, right? And we still have our roots there. Our founder, Brett Heyman, founded the company in 2010 as an elevated handbag company. And we actually launched Flower by E100 Parker in 2019 to bring to market considered quality cannabis products that resonated with stylish consumers. And so I'm really excited about my role just because it's really that intersection between all of those interests that I've really had my whole entire life.
That is so cool. And what is something that does surprise you in the cannabis industry, or has surprised you in cannabis?
So I've now been in the industry for nearly 5 years and watched the crashes and burns, and I think everyone can feel the same kind of lost optimism, but yet this long-term optimism at the same time. And it shouldn't be a surprise, but I think throughout the entire course of my career in the industry, cannabis prohibition has happened now for the last 50 years. It's going to take more than a couple years to unwind prohibition and normalize this industry. And states are going to continuously figure out ways to work within regulations that work with their specific state idiosyncrasies. Yeah. And I think that just continues to surprise me, even though it shouldn't. Right. But every time we think something's going to, New Jersey gets the ballot passes in 2010 and then 2020, and then it still takes a year and a half to really get rec off the ground. I think it shouldn't surprise me, but it continues to surprise me how long it takes to unwind prohibition.
It really is incredible. But you sit in a really interesting and aspirational intersection of this industry. I mean, I've referenced E100 Parker so many times because I feel like when I first got into the space, a lot of brands that were even trying to address more of like a feminine or like a female aspect to the consumer base, it felt very pandering, and it was just the pink washing. Yeah. The thing I love about E100 Parker is that it's like this high style, high fashion, and it's inclusive. It doesn't just have to be about male, female, it's everything. And I think that is where we're heading. And totally. It's just really grateful. I'm really grateful for it because as a consumer of cannabis, I feel like this is a brand that really does get me. And like for the first time ever, I have accessories that I don't hide with shame in a box.
We love hearing that. That's great. That's the whole point. I love that.
Well, and I think too, it's like if you look at traditional, like when I used to do work with American Express, like the person that is responsible for household purchasing decisions is often a female, and there is a design interest around that. So why wouldn't we want things that look really cool? And every time I bring out anything from E100 Parker, I get a lot of compliments. So thank you. I just feel like I'm very excited about it. I think this is part of moving this industry into a really cool new space, and I think that's something that gives me a lot of like hope around this space.
Me too. Well, I love hearing that. And I think what's been really fun too is, to your point on pink washing, what I find to be sometimes aggravating, and it's a mature and an immature industry at the same time, is we can't just put a pink label or a blue label and call it male versus female. And I think we also can't fight exclusivity with more exclusivity. Sure, we're a female-founded company. We're 100% female-operated. 30% of our women are women of color. We're very diverse within our own organization, but we have a huge male audience, and we do not want to isolate or alienate them. We're really just trying to speak to consumers that love stylish, considered products, and that certainly includes our male allies.
I love that. Yep, and I think that's what I hear all the time. So it's a really cool thing, and you hit it right on the head. It's all about inclusivity. So, so what gets you excited about where we're headed next with cannabis?
Oh my gosh, loaded question. I mean, New Jersey's obviously been on everyone's mind, I think, and we've seen obviously a really big contraction on the West Coast. I think it is still so early. I think we know how accepting the general populace is of cannabis. We know it is one of the least controversial topics in a really politically divided country right now. But despite that, there is still some taboo areas in cannabis, and we see it in the Midwest, we see it on the East Coast. And I have so much hope that these are products that consumers are actually using, but to your point, Emily, they're still shameful. They still hide it in their drawer. Yeah. And hopefully with more innovative products coming out or innovative smoking accessories, we can help propel that normalization. And I have a lot of hope there. I really do.
I have a lot of hope around that. And I also have a lot of hope around, it's this thing I keep saying, and because I'll be doing like a business panel, and then I'll hear me and my colleagues speaking about it. I'm like, oh my God, we're just turning this into like this one-dimensional thing. And I always say at the end, like, I just want to make sure someone keeps cannabis cool. Yeah. And the way we can do that is like, yes, I mean, obviously I have a background in being very focused on it from a wellness standpoint, sure, and for people who are, ill, finding ways that for palliative care. But I also think there's a really playful component to cannabis, and it's fun. And so I'm just really excited to think about the future where we can have all of those things. We can have these products that are focused on wellness and palliative care and everything around that. And then you can have that spectrum all the way down to, we just want to have fun with it.
Totally. And we always say as a company, like, we're just for a good time. And whatever that means for you, like, there shouldn't be a justification for your cannabis use. And certainly, like, we obviously respect the plant. We see it for its medicinal properties. Where we're trying to angle it is more on that normalization aspect, for sure.
Love it. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
So I'm sitting with Jocelyn Sheltraw, Director of Industry Relations for Headset. Jocelyn, we've known each other for 4 or 5 years at this point.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell everyone, how you got your start? Like, what drew you to the category and brought you into cannabis?
Okay, so initially what drew me to cannabis is pre-cannabis. I graduated college in 2007, and we both went to Cal State Fullerton.
Titans.
At Titans, and that summer the iPhone had come out. And so fast forward a year, the emergence of apps and mobile websites begins. And so this was my first real job out of college, was working with all these app developers and just being the part of a birth of an entirely new industry. So I did that for 10 years, working on all sorts of different apps and whatnot. And so prior to us meeting, probably a year or so prior to that, I knew cannabis would be that next kind of new emerging, not just technology, but like a whole societal shift, just like the iPhone had on our daily lives. And so initially I was just looking at it from that perspective, like, oh my gosh, I had so much fun working in tech and being a part of a birth of an industry. This is the next thing I can kind of replicate, that career ride and that career journey. But little did I know it would just change my entire life perspective because of truly the community and just being a part of something that feels like it's bigger than ourselves. And so, we had gotten introduced from your neighbor and a former colleague of mine when I was at Rubicon
Small
Project.
world, isn't it?
Small little world. And so initially, he had introduced us because I've been a longtime cannabis enthusiast for 15 plus years. And I loved Leafly. And he's like, you're never going to believe this. My neighbor is Cy Scott, the founder of Leafly. And I was like, no way. And so that was the original context that he introduced us. Right. And then we met up in San Francisco, and you told me what you were building with Headset. And I knew at that time, coming from ad tech, because I was using Nielsen and all sorts of different, market data companies, I was like, whoa, all right. this is not only the future and something that's so innovative for cannabis, but then to be a part of the birth of this new industry, plus being a part of such a cool company with someone that I respect and admire so much for what you've built prior. It was kind of unbelievable when I think about it now, where it feels like it's like a manifestation of just all of the things that I love so much. And I think that's what is inspiring me and just driving me to get so involved in the industry, is it's this like convergence of all of my former worlds and things that I just respect and appreciate. And I just had no idea how much it would change my whole life, like truly being a part of this. I'm sure you can relate to this. This isn't a job. This isn't just something that, you know, we're doing with our free time. This isn't a 9 to 5. This is like our whole life. And what could be more incredible than that?
Yeah, and it's so great to feel in some way, you know, that we play some part in helping this, you know, move forward, right? Because we're all in this together, trying to push this forward. And yeah, I will never forget meeting you, and it was early stages for Headset, and we had a lot to do, and we still have a lot to do. And I remember your background and some of these things you just articulated, I think fit really well, you know, where we were, and then, you know, how you evolved our company and our position in the company, you know, through all the things you do, all the supports, you know, for the operators, for our clients, through industry associations, like your board membership at the CCIA. I mean, it does really help push everything forward. So during this time, I mean, I'm sure there's been plenty of surprises for you. Is there anything that kind of stands out, like most surprising, or a few surprises?
I mean, the most surprising thing is, I don't know if I would say surprising, but it's just seeing everyone's personal journey. You know, it's like the plant touches people in so many different ways, whatever kind of company that you're building within this industry. But what's surprising to me is seeing how much that impacts an individual. This is obviously really hard to be building a company in an industry that's so new, and that regulations and just kind of how the industry operates is all evolving in real time. And so seeing how an individual manages that process is, for me, just really interesting to watch and see. And I think it's when you start to see like true leaders, the people that are going to really be pushing this industry forward and who can handle like the stress and the pressure that comes with this. I just haven't seen any, like I didn't experience that as much in tech, even though it was like the birth of this new industry. The pressure that had existed for founders or entrepreneurs that were building different apps or whatnot, it isn't the same pressure that I see in the cannabis industry. And so seeing how people manage that, it's a really eye-opening experience for me. And it is surprising when I see people who are under extremely stressful situations navigate it, where it's, you know, navigating it with peace and with harmony with people around them. I think that's like a life-changing thing for people to see. And it trickles through our environments because people have examples of people that are able to navigate these situations and do so really well with grace. And I think that's what we need to be seeing more examples of in our society, because it's tough to live in this world.
It absolutely is. And in this industry, I think it takes a lot of resilience, right? It is unlike anything else as we get this off the ground. And it's probably been a bit harder than most people expected, right? I'm
surprised you don't have more gray hairs and more sleepless nights for being in this industry as long as you have.
I think it's you just kind of come to terms with it, and you just, I don't know, humans are so adaptable, right? It starts to become the norm in a way. I think, you know, it's when people are new and they come in, I think it can be kind of surprising. But the fact that we've seen it for so long, I guess it makes it a little easier. I mean, it's not easy, of course, but it makes it a bit easier. I'm the same way. I feel like, some surprises for me have been like, in a way, how fast things have gone and how many states have adult use and how many states now have medical from when we started. But at the same time, it does feel like a little slow and a little challenging, and some of the frameworks are so limiting and all of that. So just to see how people balance that in their time in this industry is quite surprising. What are you thinking about as far as like, I don't know, what keeps you excited? What keeps you motivated? Anything you expect to happen that's, going to push this forward?
Yeah, the thing that really is motivating me right now or inspiring me, so Claudio and I have been teaching this course at Start Say University, where we're teaching this group of like 30 to 50 executives that are taking this course that are wanting to learn about all the different use cases in cannabis. These are executives that are building businesses primarily in Brazil, but throughout South America. And 75% of Brazil is a very religious country. And so there's a lot of stigma, a lot of perception around cannabis. And so, we start teaching this class and we ask people like, hey, who's consumed cannabis and kind of who's familiar with it? And we get a lot of like crossed arms. We get a lot of people that are just really hesitant about even being there. And as we go through all the various use cases, like we're always talking about the recreational and the medical use cases at Headset, right? And just as part of our segment of the industry. But when I think about like hemp and like hempcrete just got approved as a building material, last week? Hemp requires 3 times less water. It doesn't require as much space. I mean, it truly is a weed. It grows anywhere. That's why we call it weed. And so when I'm seeing people's faces, just realizing not just the medical and the recreational use cases, but how we're going to be using this throughout our society for, clothing and building houses. You can build a whole house from hempcrete. It's insane when you think about all those various use cases. And so then by the end of class, I always ask like, hey, did this change your perspective of the plant? And pretty much everyone has like a smile on their face and is nodding yes. So that's what inspires me, is just seeing how quickly the plant is being destigmatized all across the world, quite frankly. And to your point, where it seems like things are sometimes, when we're in the thick of it, it seems like things are moving slowly. But when I take a step back and I look at it from that frame of mind and I see people that are not in our world, that cannabis is not, the norm to them, that's what's inspiring. It's like, wow, okay, we're at the start of a massive societal shift. And I think cannabis plays a part in that, because what other, agricultural crop or commodity do we have that touches so many different things throughout our society? Social justice, medicinal use cases, just environmental sustainability with building materials and clothing. I just don't know anything else that we have that has as much impact that cannabis does. And that's what I'm most inspired about.
Yeah, it's easy to lose sight of the forest for the trees, right? And have that macro view, especially here at Hall of Flowers, where it's incredible to see all the California brands and everything that's happening here, but it's so much bigger than here, right? So yeah, that is a truly inspiring thing. Well, thank you, Jocelyn, for joining, and thanks for everything you do at Headset.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm here with Ave Miller, co-founder and VP of Sales at Uncle Arnie's. Ave, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, man. I'm excited to talk shop.
Yeah, so wanted to ask, like, your background. Like, how did you get into this space? How long ago? Where'd you come from? And all that. So what's your origin story?
Yeah, so I've been using cannabis since I was 13 years old, and it's always was like kind of an on and off relationship because of where I'm from. I was born and raised in Florida, and if you were smoking weed, you were like viewed as like a crackhead. And I come from a Baptist family, so it was like very, very like not okay, and was always on and off relationship with cannabis up until about 16. And then 16, I started to figure out that you can make money from it. And my parents had a restaurant, so I had always had kind of like an entrepreneurial spirit. My mom owned 3 restaurants growing up in high school, and 16, I started to sell cannabis and met this dude named Beats. Like, that was my drug dealer. We used to roll around the rodeo, drop off sacks, and learned the game from him, and started doing the same thing in my high school, and ended up getting caught up in some shit when I was 19 years old. Got raided by the DEA with 20 pounds of weed. Yeah, I went to jail for a week, and then thankfully there was a law that passed with Obama that like once you catch like the big person, like everybody else that's below between isn't as important anymore. So my cases got dropped, thankfully, after a long, stressful year. And from that point I moved, I had started a business. I started working at Zoomies, and I needed to get the F out of Florida, and I moved to Portland, Oregon, and all throughout that time was still smoking weed, had never fallen in love with the plant at all. And when I got to Oregon, was working for Zoomies for quite some time, started working at one of my old coworkers' medicinal farm in Oregon, and was learning some of the growing side, was just trimming for free bud. And fast forward to 2017, I moved there in 2013. I ended up meeting the founder of Select Oil, Cameron Forney through my roommate, and my roommate had left Zoomies, started working at Select in 2016 at their production facility, doing cart manufacturing, capping, filling, the whole 9 yards.
Was this adult use at the time or still medical?
It was still, at that time, it had actually just become adult use. So it was like when
coming from the medical side.
Yeah, coming from the medicinal side, it was already recreational, and they were really on the up and up. And I found my way into an opportunity to be a production manager for the Sacramento market, and they were talking about launching into California, and there was this whole idea, and I was hesitant for a while, and I didn't take the first offer. Stayed with Zoomies for about 6 more months, and actually ended up moving my friend Brock to the Emerald Triangle up in Humboldt, and right outside of Garberville. And I dropped off the first U-Haul of all Select's material, like all their boxes. They were just stickering it with California stickers from the Oregon sticker. That was where the lab was. Like, I brought their lab equipment. They set it up in this like small, like little area, and they were filling carts and then shipping them down to Sac. And then I had a conversation with my mom, and she was like, "You've been arrested for this. You've been a rebel against this with me your whole, like, you know, your whole teenage life. Like, you have an opportunity to jump in legally. Why would you not take this opportunity? You're 24 years old. Like, what do you have to lose? You can always go back to any other corporate job." So I said, fuck it, and was like, sure, I'll just pack up everything and move to California, and started working with Select, and did all their, started with production, learning capping, filling, QC, boxing, and then got into the lab, started learning formulation, and actually making the distillate cartridges, not the extraction of the oil, but infusing the terpenes and trying to figure out different ratios and trying to mock the plant. And this was in 2017, so Prop 215. And ended up training somebody, scaling their production in filling and capping. And around mid-2018, I transitioned from production and formulation to supply chain, and worked with this dude named Grant for quite some time, and worked coincide with him and the rest of the supply chain crew, and we built up Select supply chain, sourcing trim, distillate, crude, whatever we could get to turn into the end product. And I left February 2019, started a consulting firm called White Market Solutions for procurement, for raw material, any procurement. May you need, you know, trim, distillate, bulk flour, and started just working with farmers, sourcing material for different distros. And with the experience working at Zoomies in retail sales and retail management and just people management, I started offering more sales solutions too as well. I had never done B2B sales actually ever, until I got an opportunity with Saucy Farms and Extracts and Potters through a distribution company that I was sourcing material for. And mid-2019, I made my first sale for B2B business ever in my life at Nug in Sacramento. And from there, kept on doing different like brokerage and stuff like that. Like, you know, if you needed 1,000 pounds, you would call me. So it was this weird time where brokers were acceptable in the space where, you know, you weren't licensed, but you had all these contacts and you were making points off of selling 100 pounds, selling 1,000 pounds, selling a couple liters of distillate, and ended up meeting my business partner, and they were starting to build space station manufacturing, and they had a couple brands that they had some ideas for, but they didn't know how to do sales and distribution. And I had SOBs from learning distribution and found a great opportunity for a mentorship, and a great opportunity to develop and build a brand. And here we are 2.5 years later. We launched Uncle Arnie's May 4th, 2020, right in the peak of COVID. And here we are today.
Yeah,
so
and you're crushing it out there. Yeah, it's wild to see the sales of it. Was it everything that you expected? Anything surprise you about being in the legal cannabis since you jumped in?
It's definitely way different than the elixir market for sure. You know, you're not like having to have a burner phone, worrying about keeping catalogs of who you're fronting a half P, QP, whoever to, following up with them at 12 o'clock at night, or dropping off a QP at a frat house at 2 a.m. in the morning when they're mid-party mode. So I think what surprised me the most is the professionalism. Like, coming into like this very B2B atmosphere and just like what professional cannabis is has definitely been like an exciting aspect. And being in it from Props 215 to Prop 64 and seeing like, you know, the warehouse shows that you'd have to go onto Instagram, find somebody, DM them, see if you could get the Addy location, send your ID in there to verify that you're a real person, and then have a little like secret note, go up to the warehouse security guy where there's nobody outside, show him the note, show him the DM, show him the ID, verify yourself, and then you go in and it's trapping. Like, now it's way more professional. What I'm excited about is the evolution of the CPG aspect of it. Like, you're seeing commodity prices for oil and for flour going down. I was in Oregon 2 weeks ago, and what would be a $1,700 to $2,100 pound here, they were selling for $500 to $600 there. Like, top primo quality indoor flour, $50 an ounce on the retail shelf. And though that's scary from an agricultural standpoint, I think it's really interesting from a CPG standpoint and like the acceptance of cannabis and making it a real consumer purchase product. And I think that's what excites me the most. And the evolution of retail too, like us, the different kind of, I guess like aspects of how you can sell cannabis. Like, so many more people are taking the approach of working at Zoomies, where you're investing in the knowledge of the brands. You're not pitching a t-shirt size, you're pitching Thrasher and what Thrasher's been for the last 25, 30 years and what they innovated in the skate space. Like, now you're talking, that's what Cookies is doing and trying to pitch their story and the evolution of what it was. All of these companies that were working in Prop 215 and have been here, like, you know, Kenny with cannabis quenchers, like this dude's been doing it since 2018 and now he's here, right? Like, to see that transition and being able to have that story, and for retailers to embody that story and to be selling the brands versus just selling the product and price per quantity and quality, right? And I think like that evolutions excites me, and being more sales strategic from the retail side too. Like, you know, this isn't just selling weed. Like, if you were to work at Zoomies, you would have what we call a tap sheet, today's action plan. You would have your hour by hour sales goal that you would have. You would have your dollar per transaction goal or your basket size goal. You would have your unit transaction goal for every transaction. You need to have 3 to 4 plus units, so you're trying to upsell and like talk about these brands and the values of them and why you should buy them. So I think that those are the most exciting things for me, is like the retail evolution, because that's like where my passion lies and where I've spent majority of my, you know, early 20s was invested in retail management, and like seeing that and knowing how much that can grow brands once they take that investment versus gas station styles. Like, oh, you're coming in to buy a Coke and a Reese's. Like, we're not to that level yet, to where people have been purchasing these brands for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Like, we're still developing that now, and that's where it takes extreme salesmanship to embody and develop brands, and those brands lie on that salesmanship. So I think that that's probably the most exciting thing for me that I think is going to happen from a brand side.
Yeah, well said. We love, I mean, at Headset, we love the retailer side of the business. We love the brand side, the CPG side. I love to see the evolution and watch this. And it's great to see brands like Uncle Arnie's becoming those CPG brands and racing up the sales chart. So congrats on everything, and thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I'm stoked, dude. And thank you for letting me share the story, and thanks for being the best data partner that we could ever ask for, seriously.
Well, I'm here at Hall of Flowers with Carson Humiston, founder and CEO of Vanks, the hiring platform for the cannabis industry. Carson, you and I go back pretty far.
Way back.
So far, I don't even remember. So, like, why don't you tell me a bit about, you know, how you got your start in this crazy industry?
Right. So I'm from upstate New York. I went to St. Lawrence, a small liberal arts school in upstate New York. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes I wonder why. And had a student travel company called On Track Adventures. So I was planning trips and selling them to students. I was a party planner. Towards the end of my senior year, I was like, I don't want to be a party planner forever. I don't want to get a job. I need to think of a new business idea. I have all these students that have gone on the trips or maybe wanted to go on the trip, but they're in my database. What is something they need? They all needed jobs. started talking to people, surveying people, asking them what industries they were interested in getting jobs in. People were interested in jobs in cannabis. At the time, cannabis was only legal for adult use in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. It was pre-California. It's 2015. I was graduating, so it was pre-California. And I started researching the space, and I realized there was this huge opportunity to connect employees with employers. There was all of these rules and regulations around getting badges that were required by the state required training. So there's a lot of credentials that were needed to get jobs. And I saw an opportunity to be the company that would connect great talent with great companies. And here we are, feels like a lifetime later.
I know, 2015 to 2022, that is a lifetime, right, in cannabis. So since 2015, what's been the most surprising thing for you?
I think that the industry has come so far, but I actually think I thought it would have been further by now.
I think that all the time.
Not in a terrible way, because by it moving slowly, it gives companies like Vanks and Headset the opportunity to continue to be leaders going state by state. It gives us time to really find our product market fit, figure out the unique problems of each state, and work to get into these states. But it just feels like every year we say, next year is going to be cannabis, this big year, big breakthrough year. And we're saying that again right now. So it feels like everything has moved really fast, but at the same time kind of slow.
Yep. I'm always surprised at how many markets are online now with adult use or even medical. But at the same time, yeah, I think at the federal level we would have seen something. I think that's kind of my takeaway. So yeah, fast and slow at the same time. It's hard to articulate. How about what are you most looking forward to? So much can change ahead here.
I'm sure other people that are going to say this, but I am looking forward to some level of banking reform. I think so many of our customers are just strapped for cash, and it's because of the regulations in this space. It's because they don't have access to typical financing, like getting a small business loan from a bank, sometimes even getting a credit card. And it makes it really hard for our clients to operate. And I think a lot of people that want to get into this space just don't have the capital to do so. And so by cannabis having access to the same types of capital available to every other industry would level the playing field and allow a lot more great entrepreneurs to come in and great business owners keep operating. I think one thing that we've heard even walking around this trade show is people have fatigue, right? They're tired of every single year barely being able to get by. And they're fundamentally good businesses, but the rate at which they're being taxed is unsustainable and unfair, and a lot of great people are going to get burned out and say, I can't survive.
Yeah, it's insane. There are banks in a lot of legal markets, like credit unions. We've lost so many banks over the years between Leafly and Headset, but I think that it's not just about having a bank or a bank supporting the industry in some measure, because it's not really supportive. It's very limited. It's really hard for anybody to get an account. It's definitely not like any other category, right? There's still a lot of stigma around it and a lot of hoops you have to jump through. So I think, banking reform.
And allowing businesses to write off expenses that every other business can write off, that makes a really big difference, right? I mean, because of 280E, businesses can't deduct normal business expenses, and they ultimately end up with a huge tax burden at the end of the year that becomes unsustainable, and they can't make the tax payment, so they figure out some kind of a loan from a credit union or a non-legitimate financing source that's going to charge them an arm and a leg to make the tax payment, and then they're behind going into the next year. And you see businesses just completely upside down, and at some point the founders and owners say, why am I doing this? How much longer can we make this happen? We thought next year there'd be banking reform, and then there's no banking reform, and then next year, and at some point people just aren't going to do it anymore.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Carson. 7 years. Let's not wait another 7 to do this.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
So I think the big takeaway beyond all those great stories from many people in the space is that we really need more background music in our podcasts, right? There was something about that kind of the atmosphere, the energy that just hopefully came across. It was a good time talking to everybody.
Yeah, that reggae Eleanor Rigby was a really good rendition. Anyway, so on that note, actually, I wanted to give a special thanks to Kellen, who edits our podcast and does a tremendous job putting this all together and making us sound sharp. And also thanks to Brian for producing us. And yeah, same thing. Without a team of people, we could never get there. And then, of course, it wouldn't matter if we're doing this podcast if no one listened. So thank you to our listeners for tuning in and coming by the High Rise 100 times. And may we have many, many more episodes of a lot of things to talk about. We actually do have some amazing guests coming up for the fall. So it should be a great time. And thanks for being with us.
Yeah, amazing. It's been 100 episodes and we wouldn't be here if not for everyone listening. So yeah, really thank you so much, and looking forward to the next 100.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.